Hi, my name is Evan Fraser and I work at Arrell Food Institute at the University of Guelph. I come to this conversation dominating with two emotions in my mind. The first is an incredible sense of urgency. Agriculture and food systems worldwide are responsible for about a third of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, a leading driver of our losing fight to protect the planet's biodiversity. And at the same time, both hunger and chronic diseases related to poor nutrition are rising locally and globally. So there's an urgent transformation of food systems that's necessary to sustain life on this planet. At the same time, the other emotion is that of optimism. New collaborations, new opportunities to work with government and the private sector, NGOs and the grassroots, new technologies are giving us new tools and new ways of going about food production that should be able to offer us the potential to produce more food while shrinking the environmental footprint of agriculture. This combined sense of optimism and urgency is what brings us together today to have a conversation with Professor Sir David Nabarro. Now, David, your CV is remarkable, and getting to know you over the last 5 or 6 years has been one of the absolute highlights of my career. I'm just going to quickly go through a hit list of your CV, and then I'll let you start answering questions. So, David, co-director of the Institute for Global Health and Innovation, professor of global health at Imperial College. That's one. 2, with your partner, Florence Leben, setting up the Geneva-based Systems, Synergies, and Sustainable Development, also known as 4SD, which coaches global players on how to tackle really wicked problems. That's number 2. World Health Organization, Special Envoy for COVID, leading senior UN work for the United Nations, leading the World Health Organization and the United Nations response to major health problems, and instrumental in driving forward the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm so excited, David, that this conversation between us is part of an ongoing conversation between us, if I could be so bold. My first question, there's a lot that causes anxiety in the world. Indeed, I've started my own remarks with the anxiety of the world's food system. But let's start with the positive. What gives you hope today?
Evan, first of all, thank you for this opportunity and for that lovely introduction. I kind of count myself lucky that I've been able to stay involved in the things that really interest and excite me right through my professional career. And it's thanks to relationships with you and your wonderful team that I feel really inspired. And just where I am on my own feelings about the future, I want to say that I am fundamentally extremely optimistic that humanity, the human race, has within its capacity the ability to not only navigate some of the current challenges that we know the world faces, but to actually emerge with a place that is sustainable, equitable, resilient, good for people everywhere, but most importantly, safeguarding the planet. So see me as very much in the space of optimism. I very rarely want to go around the place with a glum look on my face saying all is lost, because actually I don't think it is. I know that there are lots of stresses and strains in the world today, but I also know that there are some amazing people doing brilliant work, and that's what I would like today and all my life actually to be championing as I move forward.
So that is a wonderful starting place. And one of the joys of working at a place like the University of Guelph is we get to interact with phenomenal young people, PhD students, master students, undergraduates. Now I've got a couple of students who have got questions prepared for you. First is Emily Duncan in the Department of Geography, Environment and Geomatics. Emily's working on how farmers use technology to promote sustainability. Deus Mugabe is a plant scientist focusing on plant breeding, genetics, and international development. So I'm going to pull up an iPad and let's hear from them a couple of things that they have questions for you. So here's question number 1, if I've got that right.
Hi, I'm Emily Duncan, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Geography, Environment, and Geomatics. To bring about food systems transformations, we need collective action. Throughout your career, you've worked hard to encourage the types of transformations we need. More recently, you played a key role in the UN Food Systems Summit dialogues that delivered 120 national pathways towards sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems. What do we need to do to get food system actors on the same page to take collective action towards transforming our food system?
There we go.
Well, thank you to Emily. It's really a very lovely challenge. And from my perspective, I want to start by saying I don't think I, and by extension we, are necessarily going to be the people who find the solutions to the really tricky challenges that exist with regard to food. But our role is to create situations where others who can find the solutions can not only bring those solutions forward, but actually share them and share them widely. So much of what we have to do now is about letting go, not trying to control processes, but letting others advance those processes. Because there's some really tough equations to solve. How to make sure that farmers get adequately rewarded for producing the kind of food that is good for people's nutrition in ways that are very restorative for the environment and for the planet, and at the same time enable everybody to have a good living and a good opportunity for sustainable and equitable growth. So these are tough things to do. I think everyone knows that it's really hard to get adequate remuneration to farmers at the moment because the necessity is to get prices down. But at the same time, if we're going to enable farmers to be able to advance with more nature-positive production systems, somebody's got to pay. So, firstly, make sure that all the right people are involved in the conversation. And the farmers have to be there, not just the wealthy, highly productive farmers who perhaps are right at the centre of their game, but some of the more marginalised farmers, people who are on relatively small landholding, people whose agency is very limited. Involve them all, scoop them in if they're not there, and make sure that they're at the table and listened to. And if they feel nervous about it, to go to the extra trouble to ensure that they're accompanied with people who will enable them to be in that conversation. Secondly, whilst they're there, try to ensure that in the conversation about the future, there is not an apparent sense that some people are more listened to than others. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about how in agriculture these days, a small number of quite wealthy people, I was going to say well-to-do, but I'm going to say wealthy people and wealthy organisations are controlling the agenda. Well, I would have thought that it's possible to construct approaches that mean that everybody who's involved in the production, consumption, treatment and processing of food is able to be actually actively engaged in that process, and not just in one or two places, everywhere, because food is too important just to be left to a few to resolve on behalf of all of us. And finally, I am going to say that in my experience, we need to invest in building trust between all those who are collectively engaged, because even if they don't agree on the way to go forward, if there is an open, trusted environment with a platform that's respectful of all points of view, it's much easier to bring people along into changes that need to happen, even if they don't actually agree on what should be done. Some people say to me, no, we've got to get everybody to agree. I say, since when in a family does everybody agree on everything? They don't. But that doesn't mean that you don't go on your vacation, or it doesn't mean that you don't decide that you're collectively going to make a sacrifice so that somebody can get to university. No, you have to create the atmosphere of trust and common purpose and accept that there will be differences of opinion, but that's normal. So those are my thoughts. Make sure you get everybody you need to in there. Make sure that they're actually given the space on which to work together, and make sure that in this way you're focusing on the impossible to solve equations.
Words to live by. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to pull up another question. This one is from Deus. And let's see if we pull this one up.
Food systems are extremely diverse and unique. They affect multiple stakeholders, multiple sectors, and they transcend multiple levels. Some parts of the world are faced with challenges of overproduction, often leading to food waste, while other parts of the world are faced with challenges of underproduction, often leading to hunger and undernutrition. Innovation in agriculture will play a role in addressing this, but there's what some call a technology divide between countries, those that can afford the technologies and those that cannot afford the technologies. Given your experience working to address complex, interconnected challenges, what are, in your opinion, the strategies and policies that are needed to facilitate equitable distribution of agricultural innovations to ensure they deliver the intended impact for all people and also the planet?
Well, Deus, I know you're not here, but I'm thanking you very much for that question. I just want to say equity is the big issue for the future. By equity, I mean the need to try to move towards a state where people get what they need from the state, from their societies, from their families, and that it is provided without hesitation. If we don't put equity number one in all our development efforts, all that will happen is that the gap between the haves and the have-nots that Deus just described will just get worse. And if you don't take affirmative action on equity, you will actually find it becoming more and more elusive. So whether it's applying to agriculture, food and nutrition issues, or applying to environmental issues, or applying to health issues, another area where I've been doing a bit of work recently, I just want to say, put equity front and centre. And even if others are not thinking equity, bring it into the conversation. That applies to access to resources like water, or like particularly water, but also inputs. But it also applies to access to technology. And if we don't do that, if we don't actually pay attention to enabling the people with less to access the technologies and make good use of them, we will end up with widening divides. And if we have widening divides, then we might as well actually seriously question what we're doing in development, because a world with wide divides between the haves and the have-nots, where a small number of people benefit and the largest number of people are actually experiencing less in terms of what they've got, that's not a world that's good for anybody. Because one thing we have learnt is that without equity, addressing some of the big challenges gets very, very difficult. Poorer people are part of the solution. They're not a problem. They're partners in finding the solution, whether it's on health, whether it's on environment, whether it's on food, whether it's on any aspect of life. And it's illusory to think that running the world so that it becomes a place where the interests of the wealthy are given centre stage, and that is just going to lead us into, I believe, a place of quite bad prospects. And for that reason, I am requiring everybody that I work with to actively promote, in a very positive way, a focus on equity, whether it's on technology, on access, or indeed, most importantly of all, on opportunity for the future.
Great, thank you. Couldn't agree more. Let's hear another question from Emily here.
Science is increasingly understanding that the connections between human health, animal health, and environmental health are so important. For example, the recent pandemic has shown the connection between diseases that move from animals to humans. Why is a One Health approach essential for food systems transformation?
Well, thanks, Emily. Emily's referring, Evan, to this real sense that we've had now since really the early noughties. It was about 2003, 2004, that the notion that we should move towards a single discipline of health that crosses animal health, environmental health, and human health, that we've been saying that's the obvious direction to go in. But it's interesting, it's not really caught fire as an issue as I would like it to have. But it's so important. We've heard about how it's relevant in the coronavirus pandemic that we're currently going through, that's just ended its emergency phase. It's also relevant in highly pathogenic avian influenza. It's relevant to trying to reduce antimicrobial resistance. And I'm sure the more we get into it, the more we will find that there are big advantages. What's the problem? The problem is this: the culture of people working in human health, people working in animal health, people working in environmental health, the culture is not consonant. Basically, human health people view themselves as saving life at all costs. Animal health people are prepared to accept that sometimes animals have to die, even be culled as part of the process to maintain animal health. And environmental health people are sometimes in an even more distant basis, because they're often struggling to find out to understand what's going on. They are the ultimate system scientists in health. Now, I don't think that the differences in culture that we see in the different branches of One Health are insurmountable. It just requires creating platforms in which the different approaches are respected and understood. And then there's space for people to come together. And I have watched that happening in some of the academic courses on One Health, but particularly in some of the approaches to One Health in a number of countries, not just the high-income countries, but also low-income countries. So in summary, please let's highlight the importance of One Health. Let's incorporate it into education everywhere, and let's pay attention to some of the challenges of the rather different cultures of the health professionals in these different areas, so that they can actually coexist without anybody feeling that they're superior or inferior to anybody else. It's doable, it's important, and I'm really glad that Emily put that one on the table for our discussion.
That's great. The final question from our students, one more from Deus.
COVID-19, conflict, changing climate all have exposed the vulnerability of our food systems and expedited the need to transform them. Is there a perfect food system? If so, what does it look like to you?
So Deus's second question, deceptively easy, quickly stated, and horrendously difficult to answer. But let me start where Deus started, about the notion that these big shocks that we've experienced in our world, all of us, in the last 3 years, are actually revealing all sorts of challenges that need attention. These shocks, COVID-19, well, that's really exposed inequities. We've seen how poor people everywhere have suffered and have got nastier COVID and seem to also fare the least well out of the containment measures. Conflict hurts poor people so badly and upsets their food systems, and we've got plenty of information about that from all over the world. And then climate change, we must remember that it is the farmer that is often the first hit by changing climates and the worst hit by changing climate. So these have been great revealers, these shocks, and we know that systems have got disturbed. What I've seen happen through COVID is a shortening of the gap between the producer and the consumer. Sometimes we referred to it as short-circuiting. In many countries, applications were developed to enable farmers to be better connected to communities. And so step number one, I think, must be, where possible, short-circuiting or shortening supply chains. Number two, focusing all the time in food systems on people's nutritional health, i.e. the health that comes from what they eat or what they don't eat. Yeah. So the nutrition dimension must be in there. Number three, making sure that all food production systems are nature positive. You don't want food production to be destroying nature. Ideally, you want it to be contributing to and generating extra resources. Number four, climate compatible. It's just wrong that food systems are contributing so much in the way of greenhouse gases, particularly the rather noxious gas of methane. And I think that we must take on board that it's 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions are from food systems. And then finally, I want everybody who's working in food systems to get a decent reward from it. You know that 75% of the more than 2 billion people in our world who are dependent on food systems are women. But the reward they get for their participation is much, much, much less than they ought to, given the actual value of their contribution. So make it absolutely women responsive, make it climate compatible, make food systems nature positive, make food systems so they're nutrition contributing, and make food systems, most of all, if you can, so that they are contributing to the well-being of all. And that would be my request. I must say to Deus that I'm not sure that this can all be achieved and that everybody can be satisfied without the constant adoption and testing of revived technologies. Yeah. And that's why I want everybody not to get too depressed about the fact that things are a bit messy right now, because the whole advantage of being human, and particularly humans now, is that we have access to amazing technologies which should make it possible to achieve more of the outcomes that I think are appropriate.
Wonderful. I'm going to jump in now with a couple of questions of my own. And to bring us from the global aspiration, what do you think, or what advice perhaps can you give people like me, people like organizations like the Arrell Food Institute at the University of Guelph, what academic institutions, what can we do to perhaps drive a food systems transformation or improve systems for the future?
You know, I'm an academic too. I've got a part-time job at my own university in London, and I've been reflecting more and more on the actual privilege of being an academic, surrounded by others who are into practicing the scientific method, testing hypotheses, and then building coalitions and connections around the ideas that are starting to emerge. Academics are brilliantly placed to be conveners of others, so that they can come together and explore new ways of working. And if, like me, you believe in systems approaches to resolving challenges, the convening function becomes more and more important, because you have to bring together the variety of actors who are involved in a system, recognizing that their perspective on the systems will all be a bit different, but giving each of them the opportunity to explore in a scientific way, to test their ideas and put them into practice, and then coalesce around the ones that will work. So I would strongly encourage you to do what you're already doing, but to do more of it, which is to convene. Not people you necessarily agree with, but convene everybody with an interest, and enlarge your circles of engagement as time goes on. Scoop in the people who perhaps are not comfortable about coming in, so you create a welcoming environment that's theirs.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, last question for you. We started on a note of optimism. Maybe we can close a little bit on a call to action. Based on this extraordinary career and perspective you've got, can you give the audience some advice on how people, everyday people, working in their lives can be an active, positive moment for change?
Thank you very much, Evan. Let me just give you my short little statement about COVID-19. The virus has been the problem, still is. The people are the solution. Yeah. And if you accept that, you also accept that you don't ever label people as being the problem. Now, I know that often that is done, and that often people in health or people in agriculture will find fault with people who misuse the land, or people who are not behaving appropriately to prevent disease. But I'm going to stick my neck out and say, actually, from my perspective, people are always part of the solution. They've always got something to offer, and there is always scope for them to make a contribution. That doesn't mean that I want everybody to change their diet, or that I want everybody to stop using plastic, or I want everybody to cut down on water use or such things, because it's not my right or job to ever impose a particular directive. But I do think it's right to actually be open with everybody that this is their world, our world, and that we all not only have a right to be stewards of this world, but we are called on to be stewards of the world. And that means in our own lives, we steward, but also in our connections, in our families, in our communities, in our workplaces, even as voters in a nation. We are stewards of the future. It's up to us. And that means that I want everybody that I work with to see that there are numerous opportunities for them to be positive contributors. Some could do more than others, obviously, because they have more power at their disposal, but everybody has a role to play. And just if anybody is in doubt, simply starting a conversation at the dinner table, about where's our food come from? And are we going to waste it? And what happens to the waste? Or what kind of extra additives, pesticides or herbicides or fertilizers are being used in the production of our food? And how do we feel about that? Recognizing that there's no pure answer to all these challenges, but that the discussion, the conversation, the debate and the dialogue are key, and just simply talking about it is a good thing. Don't let anybody say to you, talk is no good because it's not action. Actually, the best actions result from the most florid conversations. So please let's get more talk about food and then applying that talk in practice where we can.
So, Professor Sir David Nabarro, I can't tell you what an honor and a privilege it's been to get to know you. So thank you personally for your friendship and mentorship, and thank you globally for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Evan. I mean, that's beyond what I see myself doing. Thank you and your team and all here in Guelph for being the amazing people you are. You are very generous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.